Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Scott Harris, President of the FCO, and I welcome you here this afternoon for our town hall meeting. I would ask you to please silence your cell phones, put them on vibrate, please. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce people that are up here today, and that will be hopefully answering your questions. First, Jonathan Grebo, President and CEO of Ridgewood Real Estate Partners. Greg Weiss, District 2 County Commissioner. I'm sorry. Jonathan, Commissioner Weiss. Ramsey Buckley, Executive Director, Palm Beach Planning, Zoning and Building. Rod Tennyson, the FCO attorney for over 20 years. And joining us shortly will be Jack Rice, attorney with Nason Yeager, who's been very involved in the construction projects. We have 3 projects we're here to talk about today. That is really 2, but if there's any questions regarding the third, I'm certain Jonathan will be happy to answer. The Lofts of Lakeworth, which is the parcel adjacent to Desti. Lakeworth Crossing, the parcel adjacent to Tivoli. And Lakeshore at the Fountains. Am I saying that correctly? Lakeshore at the Fountains. The parcel adjacent to Trevi. As far as the parcel adjacent to Versailles, GL, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of this meeting, but we have no representatives at this point from GL here today. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Jonathan Grebo from Ridgewood Real Estate Partners.
It's okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. As was stated, I'm Jonathan Grebo. I'm president of Ridgewood Real Estate Partners. I am a partner of Concert Golf as it relates to real estate and real estate only. So I can't help with green speed or bunkers or things like that. I'm just here to talk about the real estate. I'd like to thank the commissioner for being here, as well as the planning director. They've very much helped us facilitate conversations between the Fountains and Scott and their attorneys to get where we are today. So my goal today is to just give you a little overview of where the projects are, what they look like, talk a little bit about construction sequencing, as well as a bunch of other little things that I'm sure you have questions about, and will facilitate other questions. So I think at the end, the idea is we're gonna have a Q&A. So if you just give me 5 minutes to run through a few different slides and talk about a few things, then we're here to take your questions. Most of you, I'm sure a lot of you have been to a couple of my other presentations and know I will be here until I have to leave to the airport to fly to the next place. So, but I got a couple hours. So as I said, I'm Jonathan. I own Ridgewood Real Estate Partners, and I'm a partner and a service provider for Concert Golf. Just to talk about a little bit of the professionals that have worked on our project. WGI, we have Jeff Brophy, who is our planner. They do both the planning for the design as well as the engineering, the undergrounds, the roads. Brian Seymour is our land use attorney from Gunster, and Aiden Environmental, which we'll talk about environmental, and as well as our traffic engineer. So just go over and get out of the way a little bit. I might block you. So if I'm blocking you guys, let me know. So, already? Which one, this? Better? Okay, great. So what we're here to talk about is we're talking about the property that is north of the canal. There's no development south of the canal. There's nothing planned. We've never looked at it. It's a totally different, it actually was approved in a different manner, which is a longer story for a different day. The fountains, as you know, was approved and started to be built in the 70s. So we're talking about the North Course. The North Course has 4 parcels. The one that's not on here is what we call Parcel A, which is the GL Home parcel, which, as Scott said, we sold over a year ago, and I do not know what their plans are. I can answer some general questions, but beyond that, I don't really know. Our first parcel is Parcel B. This won't work because it's a television. This is Parcel B right here. Parcel B is 62 acres. It's 318 rental units. Now, we talk about it being 62 acres because what's called the plat, which is the greater parcel of land, which actually goes from all the way at this tip all the way around to here and to here, is 62 acres. The parcel of development is actually more like 25 acres. So the actual area of buildings and land, buildings and roads and parking lots and lake in the center is about 25 acres. Everything else you see outside of this development area in the other approximately 40 acres is lakes and open space. So this is a lake. This whole thing is a lake. So if you know the lake that's there now, that's being expanded to be a much larger lake. If you look on Google Earth, we call it the Duck Lake because it actually looks like a duck when you're looking from an aerial, and that's being expanded. Right now it sits about right here. You can kind of see the back of the duck and the beak. So that's being expanded north, as well as a new big lake here in this location, and this up here is more detention and open space. So we call that Parcel B. Parcel C is a little under 10 acres, and that's the property of 70 townhomes that sits along the north side at Lake Worth. That's, as I said, 70 townhomes. Those are for sale. 2 things to note about Parcel B and Parcel C is they are outside of the fountains. They have their own entrances and exits, and there is no connection to the community. The last parcel, which has not been in my presentation before, is what we call Parcel D. Parcel D is 32 acres, which is 192 units, and that is inside the fountains. That's inside the gate, and that's, as Scott, or I think it was Scott said before, we're working to talk about that becoming the 20th court within the community. All of these site plans have been approved by Palm Beach County. I know that Parcel B, a lot of people got notices about Parcel B because there was a rezoning done on that. Parcel C and D, because of the way the code reads, I guess that would be the right way to say it, the code reads, that they were not required to go through a public hearing process because they were zoned and were meeting those zoning requirements. All right, let's see. I just zoomed in a little bit more for you on each individual project. So just to give you a sense, we're going to talk about B next. B we call the Lofts at Lake Worth. That is on Jog Road. Just to give you a sense, there's the lake, the couple lakes, and the open space. So we're here. The next one, so.
Can you just go back 1 second?
Yes, sir.
That great parcel on top, is that the power station?
This right here?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the power station.
Give everybody an idea of where this really is.
Yes, sir. So we have the synagogue across the street, power station to the north. Or, yeah, so when we got Parcel B, when we met with...
On that there, can you show us where the opening is to Jog Road?
Sure.
Please?
Sure, great. I'll happy to point those out. So the Jog Road, the entrance is right here.
Under construction now, they already opened up the fence.
That's a different parcel.
No, they didn't.
Whatever, Where I saw where it was open, and they now have a fence, can you just point it out?
That's GL property, that's not their property.
Can you point it out on that?
No, it's south of here.
Okay.
South of here.
Good question. Yeah.
So I don't have it on, I don't have it on my map. It is, hi Jeff. So parcel A sits right here, where my hand is. And then there's a great question about the entrance. So the entrance and exit to the community, the main entrance is right here on Jog Road, almost across from the synagogue. And then up here, there's an emergency exit that the county required. So that's a little further north. So when we worked with your attorneys and with the commissioner and Scott on parcel B, one of the big things was the buffer between the community, your existing community, and the new community. So we created this visual for everybody to understand what would be in between the new community and your existing community. So this is working from the bottom to the top. This is actually a 3-foot berm. Takes up a little more than 9 feet, the 3-foot berm, or is it 11 feet?
No, it's 3 to 1.
3 to 1.
Yeah, so it's bigger than, it's going to be about 20 feet total.
20 feet of land between the buffer, the drainage through the end of the berm. Right. So this buffer, though we talk about it being 3 feet high, it actually takes up 20 feet of room. You have drainage, then you go on a 3 to 1 slope. You have a flat area on top, which is this hedge, and behind that hedge is a fence. So the fence is blocked, the security fence. And then you have the same thing on the other side. So think about it of 10 feet sort of repeating itself, right? From your side, there's a drainage, then going up on the berm, flat area on top, and the same thing on the other side, which includes the 6-foot continual hedge around the whole property, which blocks the fence, and then you have the required landscaping by the county, which we've enhanced a bit, with other trees, ground covering, and a number of other types of plants. So right here, you can see what was required: the 1 tree per 25 feet, and a medium row of shrubs. And we provided all of that plus a 2 to 3 foot berm and the 6-foot fence and additional shrubs. So that's all along this area here. It's tough to see, but there's a dotted line which we can show you later if you want to come up and look, which is that fence which sits on top of the berm.
Excuse me, did you say there was a hedge on top of the berm as well as the fence?
Yeah, that's what.
A hedge of what?
How would I describe a hedge? Of plants? Hold on 1 second. My planner is giving me words I can't pronounce. It sounds like different types of plants. Podocarpius, I'm being told. It's green and dense. All right, so let's move on. I'll be happy to answer more questions as long as it's not me pronouncing other Podocarpius type things, Latin terms. Thank you, Commissioner. So the next project, called Lake Worth Crossing, is the 70-unit townhomes. Just to go back, that's what's sitting on the top parcel right here, top of the parcel on the north. This property here is 70 for-sale townhomes. That has its own entrance and exit as well on Lake Worth. One of the things that I know has been a bit contentious, but the county planning staff was pretty adamant about, is about having an emergency exit on the other side. This emergency exit is outside of your security. So it is on the other side of the gate. It is an exit only that allows them to come onto Fountains Drive to get to a traffic signal rather than throwing people onto Lake Worth and trying to use one of the turnarounds that exist in Lake Worth Road.
So that's not an emergency. That's not an emergency.
Well, I guess it would be an emergency entrance for emergency vehicles and a standard exit. Thank you it's a good question. Right, in case this was blocked, the fire department has to be able to get in. This has, so that'll give you, just to go back, now we're gonna talk about parcel D. Parcel D is Lakeshore at the Fountains. This area right here, to give you a point of reference, is an expansion on the existing lake that's out there. So this property goes along Fountains Drive and comes down towards the driving range. You got it. So Jack pointing out, giving me the right name. So the Lakeshore at Fountains is closest to Trevi, which is down here, right? Going back to Lake Worth Crossing, which is closest to Tivoli. And then the Lofts is Dieste, and I guess that's probably the closest is Dieste. So that's the existing lake. The entrance is halfway down Fountains Drive. I would say, just above about a couple thousand feet before the club. And this is 191, 192 units. We're going back and forth between the two based upon I might be blocking. I'm sorry? These are for sale townhomes. All for sale.
How far is that away from the tree?
I couldn't hear you, ma'am.
I said, it's a body of water right behind you.
This lake, there's the big lake. This is,
No, we call it a tree.
oh, there's a creek, right. So the creek crosses, what did you say, Jeff?
How close is it?
Oh, the creek crosses, we have to leave, the creek crosses about right here. I wouldn't call it a creek, but that's all a drainage. So it's a great question of so the drainage system of the Fountains is really all interconnected. It was all interconnected because of the irrigation system for the golf course. So the water comes out of the canal, it goes into the lakes or the ponds, and then was used to irrigate the system. So we still need to, as a golf course owner, you never want to give up water. Water is gold to you. So all of our ponds and all of our system will still stay interconnected so that everything can stay green. So we still have the right to come out of the canal, fill it up. The other thing it does for the community is it keeps those lakes full. It doesn't rely on rain in order for it to be blue. And then we'll put either in fountains or what's called a bubbler, things that make the water move so that it doesn't turn green. Goal is to keep it blue.
Sir, so the entrance to this community is between the front gate on Lake Worth and the Trevi Court entrance?
Correct. So it is right here, here's Trevi. So as I say, it's about halfway between Lake Worth and the clubhouse. I see a lot of hands. Just give me a couple. I got about 2 minutes, maybe 3 left to finish, and then I'll take all the questions you can throw at me. Or maybe we'll make Scott take them. The ones we don't like, we're going to give to Scott. All right. So one of the things that we sat down with Scott and Jack Rice, your attorney, and the commissioner and the planning staff is to talk about some of the additional steps to minimize the dust. Now, why do we have dust? We have dust because we're going to take what's currently planted. We have to turn the soil because there is arsenic in the soil. We've spent a lot of time at the last couple of meetings understanding what is the environmental issues on the property. From the time that this was farmed, this was an agricultural land before it was developed in the 70s, all the way, I guess in the beginning of the golf course, they used chemicals that we all later found out were potentially harmful. One of the things that happens with arsenic, good and bad, is it doesn't move. right? So over the last 50 years or 60 years, it actually pretty much stays in place. Unless you physically move it, it doesn't move. So you don't really see arsenic getting less, you see it staying in place. That's good because it doesn't go into the drinking water, it doesn't go into the groundwater, but it stays, and it's, so that's good. The bad is it doesn't get less, so we need to clean it up. So when we talk about dust control, a lot of the conversations between the gentleman on that side and the gentleman on this side was about what measures we're going to take to make sure we keep the dust to a minimum. As I said, that's number one. Dust will be controlled to avoid the mitigation into surrounding areas. The soil in the dump trucks, right? So we're going to take the soil and we are going to mix the soil, right? So one of the things that helps arsenic go away to get below the legal levels for residential development is lowering it. The way you do that is with dirt. Because we're pulling out so much dirt out of our lakes, which is clean fill because it's below, it's deep dirt, we're able to mix that and make the soil clean. We've used this process on, I would tell you, just as a frame of reference, I think 7 out of 8 properties golf courses I've worked on have had arsenic contamination that had to be cleaned up. It's pretty much in every older golf course. The one that wasn't was a newer golf course. They never used chemicals that weren't allowed. So almost every single golf course has it in it. So a couple things. So we're going to talk about the dump trucks being covered. They're going to take the dirt, they're going to put it in piles, they're going to mix it, and then have to test every pile a certain number of times. So they're being trucks in use. So those trucks, they have to go at a certain speed not to create dust, below a certain speed not to create dust. They have to always be covered. They can't work if the wind gets above 30 miles an hour. Vegetation, we talked about having ground cover, not opening up parts of the property. We don't want to come in and strip every part of the grass off, because then it's going to take us days and weeks to get from this side to that side. You work on somewhere between a half an acre to an acre a day. Give you a frame of reference of how long the process takes. So we talk about, just to put that in perspective, we talk about the parcel C taking about 30 days to do. That includes not working on weekends, that includes stopping to test, because you have to test each pile, you've got to get the results, make sure you did it well. And then if you think about it, if this is 10 acres, 60 acres, and 30 acres, you're talking about roughly 4 to 7 months of actual dirt work. Can I finish, and then I'll come back to you. So it gives you a reference, just a frame of reference. Now, it's not working all at the same time. There's not enough machinery around to have every acre of this open, but just gives you a frame of reference for timing. We talked about vegetation, lime rock and other stabilization materials. That's on the roadways so that we put all of that down so when the trucks go, they're not kicking up dust as they drive. They're also watered. We have to clean the roadways. We have to have what's we call it a tracking pad, so that at the end, if you notice at a construction site, there's large rocks or larger stones that helps keep the dust on getting to the public roads, because we don't want the planning department or the commissioner's office to call me and tell us we're putting dirt on the roads. The contractor also has to adhere to the FDP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So the approval of the plan, the work that we have to do in order to clean it up, is not under the jurisdiction of the county. We worked on all of these additional steps that the commissioner and the FCO asked us to do, but the actual cleanup work, making sure that the testing protocol is done right and done appropriately, is dictated by the DEP. So the DEP, we have plans submitted to the DEP, reports currently submitted to the DEP, and that they bless the protocol, and then we do the work, and then they bless the result. And as we stand here today, we expect to hear back again from the DP. It's a number of submissions and comments. We expect to hear back from them again in another week or two. So that's why the contractor has to adhere not only to the first 8 things that are county, but also number 9, which is the state regulations. As well as the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which means basically we can't be putting dirt back into the water, things like that. And then one of the big things that Scott had really asked us for is to make sure that the FCO had a contact person. Besides me, I'm traveling, I'm different places, but the crew that's actually working here, the super that is here, Scott and the staff here wanted to be able to call somebody if there was any on-site problem that they could get to somebody quickly. At this point, there's been a few questions. My company is planning on actually doing the work. So we will be doing the remediation of the soil, building the lakes, working on the drainage. As I said before, water is so important to a golf course. We're controlling all of that water. The water also, the lakes, the main lakes are staying with, the country club is going to still own those lakes, so that there's one group that owns that, responsible for it, any issues with it. The individual parcels, they're only responsible for their internal, we call them ponds, so we can really differentiate the difference. This is a pond, this is a lake. So the club would be responsible for all of the lakes. So speaking of construction, one of the important things to the FCO and the commissioner and the planning department was, what's the sequencing? How is this going to work in order to minimize the dust, minimize the dirt movement, and get it done as quick as possible through the remediation? So all of that is done first. All of the remediation will be done first in all of the parcels. But what needs to be done, as I said before, is we need to dig the lakes. So the first thing is, because of that berm, we want to be able to pull the dirt out of the lakes, start cleaning up that dirt, and then build the berm so we can put the fences and the landscaping. So really the first thing is, what we're going to do is we're going to start the remediation with digging out the lakes. That involves putting up construction fencing. You've seen both black fence, that small black fencing is called silt fence. Then there's orange fencing, which is called construction fencing. And the other thing that we're going to do once the berm is, what we talked about is, which you can't see behind the Latin word for berm, no, for hedge, but is that fence will be wrapped. It'll be wrapped in a plastic that will keep the dust, will also help block the dust. So all these things are done in order for to keep the dust to a minimum. So once we, one of the things that we worked on with Jack Rice, your attorney, is in that sequencing is how quickly we move to the landscaping from removing the fence, or we can actually start landscaping. We obviously need to get irrigation and water to that landscaping, so there's some specifics in the conditions of approval that we worked on with your attorney that talk about the specific steps of building the berm, putting in the fence, and then once that remediation is done, start getting that landscaping in ASAP. So some additional elements that we've talked about that with your team over here. We're giving $10,000 towards the FCO. They wanted to, for monitoring. We are required to do our own wind speed, own dust monitoring, making sure all the dust is done. The FCO wanted to do their own as well, so we're offering, we're going to give when we start $10,000 so that they can set up monitoring equipment and get reports. We talked about trying to be the parcel D being the 20th court. One of the things that we've not struggled with, that we've had a hard time, is the wall along Lake Worth. Is nobody can find the actual approval that allowed for that wall to be built. No, we have no idea. The FCO doesn't know, the club doesn't know, the county, there's literally no document. So we are required to go get we're required to go get a zoning approval, a variance for that wall. So you're all going to get a notice. So the notice I think it's going to go out, we talked about it this afternoon on our call. It is the next couple of days. It's on for April 5th, April 5th, something, first week in April. So when you get that variance notice, that is what we are doing. We have to go, we've worked with the county to work out, going to get approval to not remove the wall. Because security is obviously of the utmost importance, even though it is in front of parcel C, not part of the fountains, we all still feel that it's important as a security barrier. So we're gonna go for a variance on C for that wall, and then we're gonna do it later on for D in order to keep that there. So that's what you're gonna see. And then we also, as of late, have been talking with your attorneys, if the Fountains wants to build a wall, wants to build a fence, any additional fencing, we're happy to contribute towards that fencing. The reason why we are doing we're required by the county to do landscaping, and in that area there isn't room for the landscaping that's required and the fencing. So we said if the Fountains wants fencing, we're gonna work with them to figure out where to put the fencing, and we talked about the buffers as well, that they can put it further towards they have more room than us to be able to put it closer to the property line than we would be allowed under the code. So I think that's what I got, and I'm prepared for all. Scott, does anybody else want to talk, or you want me to just point?
No, I'd like to take this opportunity to have the Commissioner say a few words. Commissioner Greg Rice.
Good afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
Would you tell the people in the back that there are seats scattered in?
I'd be happy to. Folks in the back that are standing up, there are plenty of seats up front. You know, and as last I checked, none of us bite. And the people sitting around there, they don't look contagious either. If you're worried about the coronavirus, I think we're all safe today. I just would like to I'd like to take a moment really and acknowledge and thank you for being here today. That's number one, because it's always great to be able to come out and be able to talk to residents and our constituents. But I also really want to thank your board. And they have worked very, very hard. And Scott, as your president, has done a phenomenal job in expressing your needs, your requirements, and really pushing along what they thought were the important points for your community. And so with that, I really do. I want to thank you guys. You guys they don't get paid, right? They volunteer and do this, and they continue to do a phenomenal job. I also want to thank our staff and Ramsey and his team, because they have worked very, very hard on your behalf as well, to make sure the protections are put in place, to make sure that every code, every I is dotted. I just learned about this wall today. I didn't know, and so now apparently they've got another step we're going to have to take. But this is the work that they all did. So thank you very much, Ramsey, to you and your staff. And your attorneys also worked very hard. And we still have things to do. There are still, a few loose ends still to be tied up. But along the way, and every step of the way, I have been there. My staff, Niels Heinrichs from my office, has been there working alongside your board, your attorneys, to make sure that your voices are heard and are being a part of this process, and nobody is shut out from it. And I want to thank Jonathan. I want to thank Brian and Jeff, because at times things would get a little contentious. There's no way other than to say that's what happened. But at the end of the day, they've got a project they want to do and things they want, but they listened and they worked very, very hard to try and deliver what your board in what we all were asking for. So it's been a process. It's not 100% done yet, but we've come a long way. I think, it was probably a little over a year ago. I think when I first came out and spoke to you, I had just gotten elected, and we had our first meeting on this, and there were a lot of concerns. But I think as you've seen through this process, as we've gone along, we've made sure that, we continue to push forward and push the things that are important to this community, so that these new residents are not a burden on the existing residents. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Scott, and I think you all have some questions, and Scott can, I guess, direct how that's going to go, or how do you want to moderate?
I'd like to take this opportunity at this point, first of all, to thank Commissioner Weiss. He's been extremely helpful. And has assured us he and his staff will continue to be. They're not going anywhere. I'd like to introduce at this point Jack Rice. Jack is from law firm Nason Yeager in Palm Beach Gardens. He's represented us since we found out that development, a land sale, was going to take place. Jack?
Good morning, everybody. I don't have that much to say other than to applaud you all for your activism. I realized it was a few minutes late today. That was chiefly because when I got here, there were so many cars out along the street that I just pulled over and started walking, only to find a security guard that was at the entrance that was waiting for me to come in. But thank you very much for your activism and your interest in your community and your involvement, because without that, you guys would have not been at the seat, would not have had a seat at the table. And your board has advocated for you all very effectively throughout the process. Commissioner Weiss has been very receptive and interested in the process throughout, and encouraged the parties to come together. And Jonathan, Brian, Ridgewood, and their team have also been very receptive to your concerns. I was planning to give you guys kind of an overview of each development. That was done before I got here. But if you have any questions related to it, or you're wondering, parcel A versus parcel B, C, and D, the Lofts at Lake Worth is the development that was first approved. That was approved in mid-June of last year. That's in the eastern portion of the fountains along Jog Road. It abuts Dieste and portions of Esedra and Geffian Court. Parcel C, I think is what Jonathan is calling, is the Lake Worth Crossing development. It was approved shortly after the Lofts at Lake Worth, and that's in the northeastern section of the fountains. It's closest to Tivoli. And then parcel D, or Lake Shore at Fountains, is in the northwest portion of the community. It's along Fountains Drive, and it abuts Trevi. So if you have any questions, or you're trying to figure out which one is closest to you, those are them. And I think we're all open to limited questions and answers.
Debbie, are you here? Oh, there you are.
I'm gonna go with the guy in the Mets shirt. He's been waiting. I know I'm a Yankee fan. Just don't hurt me. I'm sorry. Oh, start date and finish date. We hope to start the remediation in the mid to later part of the year. It's hard to say totally. I think construction of roads and things like that would be late this year, beginning of next, with buildings then starting to go up. We see the sequencing of sort of the projects as parcel C being first, starting in the north. It's the smallest, easiest to remediate. We say it stands on its own, meaning it doesn't need all of this massive lakes and drainage work done. So that's at the top. So we kind of see that going first, and then B and D, after that. How long it takes and when it ends is a little bit harder to answer. If the market continues the way it is today, we think it's pretty, I think it's a few years. 2 years on C, it's probably 2 years to build out, it's probably 2-ish years to build out B. And then D is probably a little bit longer because it's for sale and a little bit bigger. So
Now, the area behind,
we'll get to everyone. Yeah.
the land behind the Trevi condos from the Fountains Drive right along the driving range, is anything gonna be built on that?
D
There's
on the
a piece of
dr-
land, there's a piece of land between
This?
the condos and the driving range.
side.
Along that roadway.
Up, go up. There's a strip right there.
we don't own that. The county owns that. So Commissioner said nothing's going to be built there. All right. So Debbie, now I'm going to let Debbie go so I don't get in trouble.
Thank you. Thank you for your polite address here, but many of us that live in Trevi are really very despondent, to be truthful, over what you have planned. I looked at the site plan very carefully. I'm a real estate broker in the state of Illinois, and have been for 35 years. So many things really surprised me. I don't know who gave the approval. I don't know if this is, the county's jurisdiction, zoning, but you have some buildings very close to our existing buildings. We are going to be looking in on other people. It seems to me, with the vast amount of land that you have there, this could have been pushed in other ways. Open space could be closer to existing buildings, and the buildings that you're planning to build a little further away. That's one of many concerns, and I'd like an answer. Who designed this? Who approved it? And how did this all come to be? It feels like it was rammed secretly down our throats. We found out about it when there was an approved site plan.
First of all, let me say this here. Nothing was hidden from the residents here at the Fountains, nothing. When we got information from our attorney, we provided it to the residents here. That being said, number one. Number two is, now I'll let Jack explain about construction and what moved.
So everybody knows there's different levels of development, obviously. And the biggest developments where you're trying to do the most creative and innovative things, which is the lofts at Lake Worth, those developments have to go to a public hearing, and there are a lot of factors at play, which is why the publicly elected decision makers have input and comment related to those developments. Smaller scale developments can be administratively approved, and when that occurs, it basically means you look at the county zoning code and you are developing it according to the requirements of the code, and it does not go to a public hearing process. And in this case, Lake Worth Crossing and Lakeshore at Fountains, the one that is closest to Trevi, were administratively approved. However, Jonathan and his team have worked with us with regard to these latter two developments in a significant manner and done things that were not necessarily required by the code in order to try to accommodate the FCO's concerns and your community's concerns. We were not necessarily happy with everything that went in, and it's kind of like, a settlement in terms of they're not happy doing everything that we've asked. We're still asking for more, and nobody's necessarily walking away happy, and we are resolving the issues that have been raised, and we're actually making more progress than if the project had just been administratively approved without looking to the FCO's concerns. Your board has been involved at every stage. There's been very small issues that have been brought up to them in terms of traffic, entrances, exits, fencing, the density of hedges that are being put in. And the commissioner's also been very involved on an informational level and encouraging us to basically sit at the table, hash it out, and get along throughout. And I'm sure it's very difficult for him because, these latter two did not come at a public hearing where he was able to say, I'd like to see A, B, and C, and D, E, and F. It's really just basically the zoning code sets up a set of directions, and so long as you follow them and you color within the lines, it's check, 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 and here is your building permit. So that is why there are some distinctions in the way that Lake Worth Crossing and Lakeshore at Fountains have been set up as opposed to the lofts at Lake Worth.
Quick question, Mr. Rice.
You're back.
Mr.
This is
Rice?
nice, Jack. Thank you.
Do you guys drive on the roads when you go to your businesses around here? I imagine you do.
Yes, sir.
Good. How populated do you want an area to be, and how dense of population do you want in this Lake Worth City or Palm Beach County? I mean, what's the rule of thumb per acre, per 10 miles? I mean, I know you have the stats, so how much more crowded will it get?
So that's going to be a planning question, and the density is going to be set by the plan. And I can tell you that all of these developments fall within the requirements of the comp plan, which has been set. I'm sorry, they're below. So it's actually below the expected density for the area.
Excuse me, could you speak a little louder, please?
The question was with regard to the density and what is the anticipated density for the area. And I was saying that the developments have actually been built and designed at a lower density than they're necessarily, you know, they could have gone higher.
I have, my question relates to the mitigation of the arsenic. I see you going out there and you're saying you're taking a cubic yard of pond water, lake water, and a shovel full of arsenic later. And how are you going to mix this up in a mix master? And how do you mitigate the dust coming out of that? And your trucks are going around in this arsenic-contained soil. As they leave the property, are you going to wash the trucks down to prevent that arsenic-laden soil, which is adhering to the trucks, from going out of the roadways?
So most, I'm going to handle your truck part first. So most trucks in a construction site stay every day. They don't leave. We're not taking soil off or on. So there is requirements to have the access and sweeping and all that. But in reality, the trucks that are here are not all roadworthy trucks, meaning they're big trucks. So there's not a lot going, there's very little dirt going in or out. There's really, the trucks won't come in full. We have plenty of dirt here. It would be, is there anything that we want to remove? But there's very little we want to remove. You would remove something that you don't want to mix together. Teas and greens, sometimes you just remove the dirt from teas and greens. They use different pesticides. Your other question was, your first question was, how do you do it? So really what happens is the first thing they do is they scrape the vegetation off the grass, right? So you move the grass out of the way. And then the process of the DEP is you create what's called a windrow. So they'll take a section. Think about working in an acre of ground, right? So they would take that and they will scrape that soil, create a pile, introduce clean fill. It's not the water from the lakes, it's the dirt that we're digging up to create the new lake, right? So it's not water. And those are mixed together and tested. So your mix master, though we don't have a giant mix master, in essence you are tilling or mixing the soil.
2 rows of dirt and...
Correct. And then what happens is there is a amount of testing that you have to do per cubic yard of soil. So it might be 4 or 5 that you're doing with each pile of soil. You send it out to a DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, approved lab and get the results back. When that's all done, assume that that's clean, right? Assume that the contractor did their job, then it is graded on the property.
And is there a liner underneath the lake?
Are the lakes lined?
The lakes are lined.
Some of them are currently, aren't they? Do we have any lined lakes here?
I'm not.
Not the new ones, no. They're not lined.
Go into the line?
The lake occurs because you're already below the water table. Got that? Yeah. So that's what makes the lake fill up and stay a wet
So it's built
lake.
into the water table?
Correct. And then we also, if it gets dry in the water table, we pump out of the canal for the irrigation system. You're welcome.
Can I ask, who is the rental agent for the rental buildings?
Don't have, no rental agent yet.
No rental agent, okay.
Are you looking for a job? Shh.
Can you tell us what the clearance is between the berm and the rear of the buildings for parcel C? How many feet is it going to be between the back of the building and the wall?
Well, C the distance between, how about between the property line of, you want to look that up? The property line from the buildings, from our property line on C to the closest building? On Lake Worth Crossing, to our building. He's going to pull up the plans while you,
Yeah, in other words, from where the back of our place.
so actually building to building.
Building to building to wall, building to berm. Building to berm.
Your building to our berm.
Right.
Yes. Parcel C.
Jack has it already.
That's from the Jack's very good, but that's the property line. I think he wanted in a, do you have a building? But I think. Right. Jack says in excess of 32 feet. So we have to have 25 feet. Right? So the minimum is 25.
What about the other sections?
Well, I didn't know.
So you know what I'm giving you is the closest.
So in other words, you said 25 and you said.
Right. So what I'm saying about 25 is that 25 is the minimum,
Yes.
Jack is saying he has the plan there, and he's saying that it is actually 32. So the code is 25. Jack is saying it's 32.
So from the back, our back wall, well, no, our outside wall, it's 32 feet.
The closest point between their development and yours is going to be 32 feet, and it's going to be on the other side of an compatibility buffer. So when I say 32 feet, I'm saying 32 feet to the fence or the line of the property.
Thank you.
Over here.
What? Okay, just do, on the distances, Jack's gonna pull it up, let's just keep going to a few more questions and we can circle back to, well, Deb's bringing the microphone around.
At this point in time, the community is relatively secure. One issue you did not address is during the construction period, what type of security or protection are we going to be afforded? Because basically you're going to have people coming in and out. Also, you're going to be taking down what we have as security portions along Lake Worth Road, or not Lake Worth, along Jog Road. So what is going to be done over the next 2 years to keep us secure?
So the first thing that your board asked us for was to quickly get to the point where the fence is up on B. Right, that was the first thing. So you are right. I have to put in a construction entrance, and I have to start the work. They have required us, or asked us, and required of us now, is to get that fence and get that barrier up first.
But that's going to be higher than what you had mentioned earlier.
What do you mean by higher, sir?
In other words, you had talked about the black screening
Yep.
and
Yes,
various things.
yes.
So this is going to be in addition to that?
No, the fence actually goes on top of that. So if it's a 6-foot fence, right? So assume I'm standing on top of the berm is here, 6-foot fence on top of that berm.
But that's not what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking about, you're going to be opening up space on Jog Road?
Yes.
And to have your construction people come in and out. Are there going to be gates or protection for us, security during that period of time? In other words, around our perimeter?
Right. So the same thing. That fence is the first thing that goes up around the properties. You are right. I have to open that up to get in. I have to go through the wall and the wall in the north. They sound like Game of Thrones.
Right.
But the wall in the north, I got to enter the fence on Jog. But that's really, I get your concern. I don't really have a great answer for it besides that it is at that point it is just the contractor. The contractor's job is to keep the site secure, and our goal is to get to the fence as soon, or not our goal, our requirement is to get to the fence ASAP.
I guess that's a new issue that our people ought to talk
Yeah.
to you about.
Just so you know, one of the requirements that we were big on from the start is that the fencing that's required typically for a development like this is really only going around the building site itself. And when you're talking about such a big area that's under construction, if Jonathan and Ridgewood wanted to take down the entire fence and then just fence the area around where their construction site was going to be, so in the immediate vicinity, they could have done that and been well within their rights. In this instance, with the developments, they're going to be fencing the perimeter of them. And there's also, they're going to be fencing the construction and fencing the perimeter, so you have like that 2 levels of security, both for the dust as well as for security itself. And we've also done things with the first development, and we are talking the Lost Lake work, and we're talking about them with the others, so that once that fencing goes up, the actual permanent fencing after that earthwork's done, that the landscaping and vegetation goes in at the fountains side of the fence ASAP, as well as it's wrapped. And the purpose of that wrapping, this was actually something Scott brought up, is so that during the period in which Jonathan's doing construction in the yard, you have either a fence that has been wrapped, and you also have vegetation that's growing up in the interim, so that at no point are you stuck staring at a construction site for potentially a couple years.
Hi, are you going to do the ground mitigation all at once for all 3 sites? And then you know.
I'll give you the, hold there on the first question, I'll get there, and then I'll let you ask the follow-up. We think the sequencing is north to south. That's what our belief is now, everything we're figuring out, but is to go from the north on Lake Worth, remediate that small 9 acres and be done there as we start to move south and have to build the lakes and then remediate this section and then move to D. It's a little dependent on how many contractors.
The parcel C, you do the ground mediation and then you'll just leave it there sitting as dirt? Or
No,
you'll start
well,
building
then,
C before you
it's a great question.
Before you demolish B?
So there's a couple of things. Demolish, I like that, but not much to demolish out there, just move. So
You finish one before you do the next.
one of the issues is we have to wait for the so we'll do the work, we'll test it all, get the results back that it's clean, and put the dirt in place, okay, where the dirt's gonna go. We then are required by code to stabilize it so it's not blowing around, it doesn't, right, so we'll roll it, compact it, and then we have to put some sort of ground cover, right, we have to ground cover whatever you open up. Construction can't begin on the development, the roads and those type of things, until the DEP gives you the clearance to go ahead. So the process is do the work, get the results, submit all your results to the DEP, and they respond. They can take almost, as Brian said, as long as they want. It could be as short as 30 days, it could take 6 months. Doesn't mean the ground is open and dust is blowing, I'm still required, but that's sort of, if you see nothing happening for 6 months, that's because I'm waiting for the DEP, they issue you what's called SRCO, they call it, but I don't remember what the acronym is, SRCO? Site Remediation Closure Order. And that's what we're waiting for. So that's a little bit of that.
Meantime, will you build work on the next one for ground mediation?
Correct. So it's a process of moving, testing, waiting, and then construction. So that gap of really nothing happening is waiting for the DEP to give us the sign off that we did it right.
And so everybody knows, one of the stipulations of the provisions we were speaking about earlier is Jonathan's team has agreed to share data with us with regard to that testing, and the FCO does have an independent environmental professional that has been looking at it and just making comments or basically dotting I's and checking T's, and will continue to be involved throughout that process.
Sir, who's going to be living here? Is it going to be low-income housing?
We're following
following the one with the mic?
No.
She's in charge.
I get it. So
I
there,
want to ask a question, please.
yes, ma'am.
I live on Tivoli,
Yes, ma'am.
and I am in the buildings that face Lake Worth Road. I wondered if there's any regulations when you turn that soil. The articles in the Post-Times, the last 3 articles regarding this arsenic issue have been very disturbing. I want to know, is there any regulation on how close you can turn soil that contains arsenic to a residential building?
So, the answer is I am required to clean up my property from property line to property line, right? So I have to do the entire parcel of ground in order to get a clearance that it is clean, to get my clearance letter from the DEP. So I am going to be up to my property line in moving dirt. And that's the requirement of the DEP.
How deep do you have to go?
Did you have it?
Yeah, sure.
I think the question was about the mixer itself.
Yes, how you.
So the mixer, so there's a number of things that impact that. The DEP regulations.
It's just not a mixer. It's a big giant bulldozer.
Well, look, it's not, yeah. So there's a number of things that are in place, both in the DEP regulations, so that the dozer goes around the property line. The mixes, they work. They're not pulled up, moved around, so it's not blowing. But because of the sequencing that is required and which we've agreed to, and we've agreed with Jack, we're putting the final touches on an actual agreement that will bind us to do this, that there will actually be other things in place to make sure that there's a barrier as well. So in addition to the fact that it's not being blown, there actually is barriers in place, and there is regulation on when you can do it, how you can do it. We've got wind issues, we can't work in certain wind that we've agreed to, and other things to make sure that doesn't happen. And that was a lot of the discussion we had with Scott.
Your 20-foot wide berm that's 3 feet high with a 6-foot fence on top, that's not around Trevi, correct? The people who are in Trevi are going to end up having. You're putting that up with protective barriers on it to prevent the dust from getting in, but you're not building one around Trevi. The dust is going to roll right into those residents in Trevi.
No, you are right about the berm part. You are not correct about the fence part. So we will fence the property while we do the remediation.
Now I've seen the plans of your buildings, and I know where our property line is.
Yep.
You are less than 25 from anything in Trevi. This is extremely close. You're going to be dusting up Trevi like nowhere else on the property.
So we are required, we have 25 feet from the rear of our building to your property line by code.
Correct.
And then there's another 10 feet to your buildings.
Correct.
So I'm meeting the requirement.
Actually, I could point out to you on your map where you're not.
Happy, come on up after. We'll go through it with you.
Okay. No, I don't understand why, the piece of property, which is county owned, the little strip, which has an access road of its own, which can be your exit out onto Lake Worth Road. I don't understand why the county doesn't allow you access through that little strip. Or even to do a land swap, where you can build and set it back 30 yards, and then give us a little more of a leeway of a buffer between our homes and your construction.
So, the exact question Jack asked, we actually investigated it. In order to do that, there's a number of issues. One, that property is actually far more contaminated than the golf course, which is why it's.
How could that possibly be when nothing else was ever developed?
It was actually long ago. it was a dump site. It's actually much more contaminated than the golf course from what it was decades ago. That's why when there was a question about that site being built, Commissioner Weiss was very clear that it is never going to happen, because to disturb that soil would actually become really problematic.
We had the same thought. Your board brought it up, and so I pursued that to find out, why don't we do it this way? And our staff came back and said, the reason why we have that land, and the reason why I was able to stand up and tell you that's never going to be developed, is that land is very contaminated, and they will not allow anything to be done to it. So they're never going to let a road be built or anything go on that land because of the contamination that's there.
Okay, so I have a two-part question. Since the new construction above Trevi, they're going to be using the Fountains Gate, right? Why don't they make it part of the 20th court instead of having to worry about all the fencing issues? Because how would those guests get into their community?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a separate entrance?
We're working with Jack and your law firms to work on that now.
I think it makes sense
But
to make it.
I think everybody does. So we're working through that. The question was about the parcel D west side being a part of the Fountains as a court. It is not yet. Where it stands today is it is a separate. The golf club actually owns the roads in here, so we have access and things like that. But it is one of the things that we're talking about with Scott and Jack to make it a part of the court. It makes sense.
I'm Rod Tennyson, General Counsel for the FCO. That's kind of in my area that I've been working on and communicating with all the parties concerned. We would like to see more courts come in because that's more money for our community services, and that means you pay less. We're working on the documentation for that right now, and I think that will be successful, but that will definitely be to your advantage in your pocketbook.
Thanks, Rod.
Okay.
Just so you know, Debbie's working the room in the back, trying to get to everybody. We're good. We're not going anywhere yet. She's in the back, handing around the microphone. So we're going to come back around. I promise. Well, you are almost up, and I'll get to it because it's a great question.
My question is the entrance and exit on Lake Worth Road, which is right alongside of Tivoli, where you're building parcel C, if I'm not mistaken, which is the townhomes, correct?
Are you talking about up here?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay, my question is, you said the exit is going to be outside our gate, where the light, in other words, you go through the gate to leave, then there's this little stretch, and then there's a light.
So I didn't do a great, someone pointed out I didn't explain it well, okay? So the main entrance and exit, which will be gated for that parcel, is up on the north here. You can see, it might be hard to see, you're welcome to come look at it later, is that little circle there. That is the main entrance and exit.
And what about when the people want to leave?
So there is a secondary exit only. It would be an entrance in emergency situations for fire EMS. So that's who asked us to have a secondary exit or a secondary ingress or egress is here. And what is here? That is beyond your gate. So it is between, but just so I can say it again, it is between the gate and Lake Worth Road.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
our concern as a community.
Yes.
These people are going to be exiting in the morning, working people, obviously, then that's not a retirement community that you're building.
That is correct.
So all these people are going to be going out that exit between the hours of 7 and 9 in the morning to get to work. As it is now, I have to go through a gate, wait for the light 4 or 5 times. Now I'm going to have more waiting time because I'm going to have people getting out of that community. So why can't we just be an emergency for the fire department, not an exit where we have to contend with that on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's been a lot of conversations about it, but it was something that the county and us have agreed on. And Brian can give you more of the background.
So, the county, just to start, the county has a regulation that typically requires that all of the traffic, now this is not happening, but it typically would require all of the traffic to exit onto Fountains and go to Lake Worth Road. And we were able to work with them, so the end game of the way this is designed and worked, that at that peak, there's only about 10 trips, because people are also, when they go out to go to the right, they go out the entrance right onto Lake Worth Road. And then the ones that are going to the west would be the ones that go out into the left at that peak hour when you're leaving. And the distribution with the traffic engineers that I'm not an engineer, I'm not playing an engineer, I just have the numbers from the engineers. It was resolved through their process with both the traffic engineer for the project and the county's traffic engineers to put those trips out that way, because it is really ultimately, at the way the county presented, and it's fair, is a safety concern. Because if no one could go left, you end up with right, jetting across 3 lanes of traffic, trying to make a U-turn to go back, and you create a lot of conflict issues. And because the number of trips were down, we were able to just take those trips right, but to go left you can go. But there was not a lot of trips that did that in the morning.
Look,
I take that every single day to get onto the turnpike, and I leave my house between 8 and 9 every day. Do you know how many times I miss the light to make the left-hand turn? And I'm only contending with Fountains now. Fountains people, now you're going to be building and shutting down the south gate, because you're going to be rebuilding over there, which is now going to let everybody be coming out the north gate along the whole main street. It's taking an hour to get out of the community.
First of all,
Here you go, Scott.
just regarding the South Gate, this will not interfere with the South Gate. The South Gate's plans are to be construction this summer. So they're talking past the summer.
Still time enough to get out in the morning with the lights. Now we're going to have 70 units, or how many units are trying to get out in the morning?
It's not just, it's, well,
yeah. Hello?
Yes, sir.
This is more an observation. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a developer, I'm just looking at this process. And I want to focus in on parcel D for a moment.
Okay, sir.
Now, I've gone to a series of meetings about the other 2 parcels. I also understand, for lack of a better word, that parcel D was kind of fast-tracked because the number of condos fell below a certain threshold. And once you fall below that threshold, the legal requirements are not the same. And I've also heard this gentleman over here talk about a legitimate concern he has about the property and whether or not there'd be a burn or a fence and how close those would be to Trevi. And it seemed like a legitimate concern. As a matter of fact, your presentation showed the one at C, never really showed anything to do with Trevi. Your response to the gentleman about his concern was, we are within our rights to do this. Maybe I'll take a look at it, maybe I won't, but we are within our rights to do this. You know, you might be within your rights to do many things, all right? But I'm very concerned about traffic patterns on Fountains between Trevi and now Tivoli. I'm very concerned about arsenic coming over to Trevi. I'm very concerned about all these issues. And for me to hear, well, you know, legally, because we built below a certain threshold, or whatever the legalese rationale might be, that therefore we can basically have carte blanche with what we're doing there. And it almost seems to me it was like a little bit of a shell game. We were focusing so much on these other 2 developments that suddenly this and a massive development it is, being built around Trevi, was just introduced basically at this meeting. We've all heard the whispers, but there was so much public comment on the other two developments, which have led to some adjustments on your part. Where is the sensitivity to the concerns we have about this development at Trevi? Because if I'm not mistaken, what I'm hearing is we are within our rights to do this, and therefore we will. I'm also hearing that there was representation of our concerns and our needs. In the last month, this is the first time people in Trevi Court have been made aware of this. That does not seem to me to be indicative of where we're going. Okay? I think you need to actually include us more.
If it's the first time in the past 30 days that you've heard about this, shame on your board.
Okay, I say most people in here, then it's shame on our board. And by the way, you, sir, are also the president of the entire complex. So it will also therefore be shame on you. Now listen, I think the morally right thing here, and also build a super wonderful development that you'll be proud of, and our community will be proud of, that you need to include us more in the loop. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
When was the last time? I go to court. You never get down there every morning. You're telling me that
Excuse me, sir. Please be seated. Sir, please be seated. Please be seated, ma'am. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Next, Debbie, please.
Good evening. Question, a couple of minor things. Excuse me. Has there been a phase 2 report submitted to the county that has been approved? Number one. Number two, the 4110 Tivoli Court building is the only building that is very close to the Florida Power and Light. Is there anything being built behind that? And three, the last question is to Mr. Greg Weiss. On Monday, we almost had a major road rage in front of the fountains. Cars were coming in, and I witnessed it. Cars were coming in to check through the gate. I went where the bar code is. But they were out onto the Lake Worth Road, blocking cars from going from west to east, and the screaming was loud. Isn't that going to create a problem in more intensity when more cars are going to be permitted to go in and out of the north gate on the development, especially when you have guests coming in, construction workers coming in? Why would you want to approve something like that if it could create maybe road rage and maybe somebody being killed?
I'm going to address the environmental. Okay. No, his first question was about environmental. Yeah. So we're well beyond phase 1s and phase 2. We've done extensive testing, many borings. All of that is under the jurisdiction of the DEP. The county has the jurisdiction at that point is not with the county. It's with scientists and professionals in Tallahassee. And that's who oversees all of the testing. We do have to submit environment. I think we have to submit a phase 1 and a phase 2 for our projects under the normal course, but in reality, we are so far beyond that. Would you come up, I don't know where 4110 is. Will you just come up after? And we can show you and talk about a specific building?
And the last question was Weiss, Commissioner Weiss, are you concerned about the traffic coming in and out?
Mr. Levine, I can't comment about the traffic coming in and out in your gate and how fast people can get through your gate. Maybe that's, there's a way to help, speed people through there, but, I mean, there's nothing really, I mean.
So I just saw that on my
Yeah.
and it was bad.
Yeah, I understand. And, maybe there's a way to help get people in and out faster.
No, to answer your question regarding the traffic, that particular,
Excuse me?
those, most recently, both at the north and the south gate, Concert Golf has had affairs here, as they will continue to do. Unfortunately, not informing the FCO and security as to when these affairs are going to be occurring. So therefore, we were shorthanded in terms of manning with enough people so that this doesn't occur. We now have John Becker, who I believe is here, our Director of Operations, has been in touch with the Country Club, now has a listing of all affairs, and will be manned accordingly.
My question, first of all, I don't live in the north end,
Okay.
but my question is for the zoning. Engineers may sit at their desk and figure out what they think is right as for traffic patterns. My question is, have you done an actual physical traffic
Counts.
survey?
Yeah, traffic counts.
As to the light, how it changes? Because first of all, there's only room for 6 cars once you leave the gate on the north end of Fountains Road, which I believe is a private road. So when you leave the gate, I don't travel to work, so I don't use that gate at normal busy times. I have yet to get through the light on a first run. There's only room for 6 cars once you get through the gate. Now you're going to have an egress coming in from 70 things.
What will happen, and we've had other, not exactly like this, but other, where we've had additional homes come into other developments where they've, and what we'll do is with our traffic engineering, once this starts to come online and we start to see the real activity, then we can adjust the traffic light timings so that they will, and we've in the past, we've had them modified, and so but we can't do that until the cars are there, and then we see, the engineers can see what they need to do and how they need to adjust the timing. But that will happen, and once we're advised, they'll make the change. But I'm telling you, the traffic light timing is a function of how fast the cars clear out of the.
There's more than the light involved, because you don't need it for the right. You're using it for the left. And when you come out of the gate, on the right side we go right, and on the left side we go left. And the traffic is going to come in from the right side, which is going to block the right going out. There's not enough room.
So let me jump in here a little bit, because I think a lot of people are having issues with how this got to be and what it is and why we're actually here. Technically, the developers don't need to be here. This is beyond the scope of what they're required to do by our code. So I can only enforce what's in the books. They've met or exceeded what's in the books. The gentleman at the back was worried about the house being too close to the property line, etc. Well, if that occurs, the development doesn't go through. So they've gone through 17 different agencies, including traffic, including fire, health, DEP, the whole 9 yards. They've gone through all of those to get to this point. All of the vast majority of those protections that you saw on the slide earlier, the vast majority of those are those protections that they voluntarily wanted to do or have been asked to do. The county didn't tell them because we couldn't tell them. We could only tell them what is in our rule books. And I know there's going to be a question from the gentleman in the back regarding workforce housing. More than likely, the developer doesn't want to do the workforce housing, but it's a county requirement for any new developments going in. And that's what has to happen for this to move forward. So we're here. He's got a table there, he can let you know. And just so you know, all these questions that you're asking us, the vast majority of those are on our website and pretty easy to find into the very minute details. So you can go there and look at traffic and the application and site plans and the whole 9 yards is all there. But they've gotten here, I can assure you, because we had a very intelligent staff look at this application with a fine tooth comb, and that's why we're here. Define what term?
So this has just been asked a few times by three different people, and sir, your question in the back about low-income workforce housing. So our projects are not low income. We're trying to maximize the values of the community, of the rent, all of that. The county has specific codes that require what is called workforce housing. So based on a calculation, there are 12 workforce housing units within the apartment community. There are 11 within parcel D, and I think that leaves 11 in D, and there's 11 in C. So what that means, so what that means is there's certain income thresholds that people can qualify for to live there. So of the, here, Jack has the note here.
And so you guys know, when we say workforce housing, this is attainable housing. This is housing for people that are working regular jobs. This is not, government housing. The parameters are between 60 and 240% of the area's median income. That means that if you are meeting the average income in Palm Beach County, you can still qualify for this and make double the average income. So you guys know if it's being sold, which it sounds like it will be, these attainable units are being sold for between $160,000 and $300,000.
More than most of them pay for that.
For the sale, the ones that are for sale, the ones that will be rented, and the one development monthly would be between $1,100 and $2,600 per month.
The for sale was for C and D, and his rental figure was for B.
For B.
So pretty.
Those are still pretty high amounts.
I have two concerns that you haven't mentioned. One is there are hundreds of trees in all the three properties that you are doing. When we had to cut down a tree in Trevi Court, I'm the president of Trevi, we had to take the circumference, go to Palm Beach County, get the permission with the license, and we had to put in 12 trees. You're going to be taking out hundreds of trees when you're leveling the ground. Are you going to replace the correct amount of trees?
Yes, they are in every place, including Palm Beach County. We have to do that.
Okay.
There was a specific study that we have a tree survey that was done. It actually names trees that you need to keep, trees that you need to try to move, and trees that you can take down versus native, non-native, health, all of those type of things. And then you have to replace, landscape, do all that. So the same thing that you go through as a court is the same thing that, well, it's probably maybe a little more stringent on us, but you will see, one of the things with environmental cleanup is a lot of trees come down. The soil is around the trees, it's on the trees have been living in it, so trees do come down. I don't want people to, but there is a huge level of replacement of trees. So you'll see trees that will be wrapped or marked off, those are to stay. Then you'll see some being moved. You will see a lot come down, and then you'll see massive amounts of landscape come back in.
Can you put a lot of those trees between Trevi and this new building?
Yeah, a lot of the requirement by the county is in that buffer area.
Okay, and my second concern was, if you're having approximately 200 townhouses, each townhouse will have 2 cars. They will come in 3 or 4 times a day, okay? So you're talking 400 times 4, 1,600, 1,200 to 1,600 cars in and out of one road onto a one-lane road coming from our gatehouse down. It's going to be impossible. I mean, you have to take into consideration, as besides building all of these developments, that you should widen Fountains Drive to at least 2 lanes and to put in a traffic light so that we won't have head-on collisions as they're coming out and they want to go north, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is a major concern. You should widen it to 2 lanes from the North Gatehouse, at least down to the Country Club.
Thank you. And thank you for being patient.
No problem.
Thank you.
So my question, I'm from Destate Court. My question is, on that map, where is Destate Court as an adherence to the traffic and all that building that's back there? Because I see on the map that you guys only have the areas highlighted for the construction. So it's really hard to tell where Destate Court falls in on this.
Will you come up after and we'll show you?
Sure.
We'll show you. My issue is I have a flag. Good, no problem. We have one more. The gentleman, the front row has been waiting patiently. So let's get to them and then we'll ask.
Thank you. Relative to Trevi Court, what is the distance from the property line of Trevi Court to the closest building that would be in parcel D?
Well, no, it's the property line to the building. Are you asking from the property line to the building, or from building to building?
No, not building to building. From the property line to what maybe a berm or then the building is.
Whose building?
Your building or the new building?
No. In other words, the property line from Trevi to the distance to the building of the new building.
So the 45 feet? 25 feet.
25 feet?
Yes, sir.
And is there going to be a berm in between that or not?
There will be a berm on their side of the property? Or I'm sorry, there will be a landscaped buffer.
Landscape but no berm?
Correct. And that's because there's no room in that area. I can tell you.
Look, wait, hang on. The property line at Trevi is pretty close to the building.
Correct.
10 feet.
It's 10 feet.
My property line is currently
Okay,
10 feet.
so if what you're saying is that it sounds to me like from the building, which is 10 feet from the property line, that it'll be 35 feet before there's a building.
That's right. That's right.
And that's the back, I presume, of the...
Back to back.
That's the closest point, and like you said, the property line is the closest to your building.
You know, and the other thing is, it's not clear on the map, and I'll come up.
Yeah,
It's where Trevi literally is. I mean, it's...
Come up. We have. You can see dimensions and that type of thing. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm in DST Court. I'm
Yep.
the former president of it, so I'm involved in this. I want to introduce a different subject to this. We have, and I'm sure other courts have it as well, a serious rodent problem.
Right.
We have rat traps around all our buildings and
Yep.
our attics and everything. My concern is halfway down the old North 6 hole, which would be just south of that rest area. If you're traveling in a golf cart along that area, there's a road, a little path that actually goes off to the left and into the woods, which is, we always used to call the dump. It was the Fountains dump. So
Right.
we used to see the dump trucks come
Yeah.
off the golf courses and
Yeah.
bring the fronds and
Organic
everything
debris.
else
Yeah.
and dump it. My
Yeah.
concern is that's gonna be a haven for rodents.
Yeah.
When you get in there and start construction,
We
where are these
have
guys
to.
gonna go?
Well, there is code on the county. The county has code that we have for rodents and those type of things, but we have to clean it up.
So
too.
will something be done in advance to prevent?
I don't know. You know, the question is the county code on rodents and that type of thing. Isn't there one during construction that we have to follow? There's a rodent prevention plan that we have to have.
Some of the arsenic.
Yeah, that's why the rats get so big. They are.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank, I want to thank Jonathan. You're more than welcome to come up. You're more than welcome to come up. I want to thank Jonathan. I want to thank Brian, Jack Rice, Rob Tennyson, and certainly Greg Weiss and his staff for joining us today. And if you have any further questions, you're more than welcome to come up here. Thank you again.